You have accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast of OA. This is episode number 140. I am your co-host Myron Rumsey, and I'm joined by my good buddy Phil Bova. Phil, how's things going in your neck of the woods?
Things are going great here in the Midwest. Fall is in full effect. It's getting cold. It's supposed to be a cold day tomorrow here, so and it's supposed to be cold this weekend. So the temperatures are starting to drop. So winter's coming.
They're talking about the S word here for the weekend.
Yeah, we've had that mentioned. Last I heard, it was supposed to be here on Sunday. We were supposed to get a little bit of snow on Sunday, but I mean, who knows? It's the Midwest, though. The temperature is just it's temperate around here. It's just odd. I mean, you never know what's going to happen. We
like to kid here in the western part of New York State that we only really have three seasons: pre-winter, winter, and post-winter. And And, we're getting ready to hit the winter part. It's funny because the leaves here, part of upstate New York and central New York where I live, the leaves are really beautiful when they change. And we've got a lot of rolling valleys and hills and stuff. And it's usually really gorgeous. But we had such an odd summer. We had so much rain that we kind of didn't get the colorful leaves we usually get. We kind of went from one day still having green leaves to the next thing they were yellow and fallen.
See, the sad part about here was, like, it was a few days before Halloween. I remember it being close to Halloween, the 31st. It was really, really, really vibrant, and it was really, really, really fall. And then, like, the day of Halloween, it had rained, that morning or whatever it was. And all the leaves fell. Then they were all damp, and then they're all on the concrete. And then they're all just getting nasty and wet. And it kind of took the fall away from it. It just took it all away.
Yeah, we had rain the day before Halloween, and then the morning of Halloween, and then it fortunately for all the trick-or-treaters, it kind of laid off for most of the rest of the day. But yeah, we went from not having any leaves to my yard is completely plastered in wet leaves right now.
Yeah, that's what happened over here.
Yeah. But anyway, we got a lot of stuff to talk about, at least in terms of the debut issue of Grant Morrison and Liam Sharp's The Green Lantern #1. So that's definitely going to be something to talk about. It's interesting seeing how many articles have been out lately about the book and interviews with Morrison and stuff. So I'm excited to talk about it and hear what your thoughts are. And then we're going to do for the retro review. You decided to go back and pull out Green Lantern Mosaic.
Yeah. I wanted to make sure that I touched on all the fan base here. I know I'm a huge Hal Jordan fan. I like Jessica Cruz, but I'm not a big fan of a lot of the others, Maybe by some stretch, Guy Gardner I like a little bit, and I like Kyle Rayner just a tad, but I don't like Simon Baz, and I don't really care for John Stewart. And, a lot of the other ones they're cool enough, but, we all have our favorites. But I want to touch on every era, and I want to touch on each character to make sure I give them credit where credit is due, because John Stewart is integral to the fan base and integral to the Green Lantern Corps.
Absolutely. And John, I think a lot of John fans come to John Stewart from the perspective of, the Justice League animated series. I think that's where a lot of his fans really originate from. But Green Lantern Mosaic was really John Stewart's solo comic, and it lasted about 18 issues, and we'll talk a little bit about the history of it. But for fans of John Stewart who have never read that series, I highly urge you to read it. It's a little trippy. It's very Grant Morrison-esque, if you will. But it's definitely a series worth investigating. So I'm kind of looking forward to talking about that one. So we've got a little bit to talk about, and I'm excited for this episode. I've been wanting to talk about this Green Lantern book since it came out. We're recording the day after the issue is released, so I've been I'm dying to hear what you've got to say about it. And we did a little survey on Facebook and the Facebook group for the blog of OA to get some feedback there. And I'm interested in hearing your reactions to some of the thoughts that are being shared there too. So I'm looking forward to this episode.
All right, buddy. Sounds great.
This is Giancarlo Volpe, producer of Green Lantern, the animated series, and you're listening to the podcast of OA.
All right, Myron. November 7th, 2018 has come, and here we have the long and hotly and waiting anticipated title of The Green Lantern by Grant Morrison and Liam Sharp.
Yeah, I don't think there has been as much hype for a Green Lantern book since Jeff Johns relaunched Green Lantern back in 2005 after Green Lantern Rebirth.
And also with that note, I mean, the social media aspect has considerably grown since then too. So it seemed like it was more heightened just because of that.
Yeah, I think that this is just a different era in terms of social media presence and so on. But I've seen a lot of interviews with Grant Morrison and Liam Sharp, and Grant Morrison was on the DC Universe DC Daily Show just the other day, and I think they're doing a lot to try to promote this book, which I think is a really good thing. The first issue came out yesterday as of the time of the recording of this episode, and critically, I always go to a site called Comic Book Roundup. comicbookroundup.com. It's kind of, as much as I abhor Rotten Tomatoes for movies, the only way I can describe this site is it's like the Rotten Tomatoes of comic books. They have a number of reviewers and review sites, and they pluck those numbers and give an aggregate score, and then they allow people who create accounts on the site to put in their own scores. And then you can go and you can see, what's the critic rating, what's the user rating, and so on. And critically speaking, the book got an 8.5 out of 10. From critics and an 8.3 out of readers. So unlike some of the Hollywood movies we've had, readers and the critics seem to be pretty much aligned with that. A lot of perfect scores and a couple of scores on the other end of the spectrum. So it's interesting. It's not universally loved, but it's not universally panned. And it seems like the people that are really excited about it level off the people that are not as happy with it. I went to the Blog of Oa Facebook group just to kind of get a barometer reading of what do people think about it that are fans that might be listening to our show. And it's interesting because some people are very excited about it. They thought it was an excellent issue. And then some people, like one person said, I gave it a 9.0 out of 10. And one person said they were closer to a 9.5. Some people really commented on how much they liked Liam Sharp's art. And then it seemed like it had a very European look, which I would agree to. And then, some people were like, well, geez, boy, this doesn't really line up well with where Robert Venditti left the character. It almost seems like it's a step backwards for Hal. One person questioned the sex scene in it, thought it was a little unusual to see a sex scene in a Green Lantern book. So I think it's a little across the board, which I'm not surprised by, because I think Grant Morrison is one of those guys that, he has his own vision for what he wants to do, and it doesn't always line up. And I know when I reviewed it, I myself had a couple of moments where I'm like, boy, that doesn't seem quite what I would have wanted to see. But it's Grant Morrison's artistic vision, and there are things about it I really do like. I think if I were to describe Grant Morrison's version of Hal, I think I would say that what he did is he kind of stripped a lot of things away and tried to take all of the different incarnations of Hal, because Hal's been everything from a toy salesman to an insurance adjuster to obviously the test pilot that we've all become familiar with. And he's trying to take all those different phases and say, well, how does this work? If this is one person and they've gone through these different things, why would he? And why would he go from being a test pilot to being a toy salesman? How does this line up? How do I parse this reality and make it fit? And I think the Hal we see here kind of does in a lot of ways. One of the things Grant Morrison says in the interviews is that, anybody, if you look at an astronaut who's left the Earth, they come back to Earth with a different perspective because they've suddenly seen from outer space, they've seen the reality of what Earth is. They've seen Earth as one giant mud ball, essentially, and it's hard to come back to the mundane 9-to-5 things that you and I we all experience. How do you come back to that almost mundane existence after you've been out there,
Well, not only that, like not even from that perspective, but also the perspective internally, because what you visually grasp by being an astronaut is looking at this whole complete world. And when you come back down to Earth, you have to leave that largeness behind you.
Right. How do you deal with things like politics and right. day in day out in a 9-to-5 job and putting food on the table and those kind of things? And I think he's trying to bring all those elements together. And I can see where there's some criticism of where Jeff Johns took the character and where Robert Venditti left him when we last read Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps. Hal just seems like a very confident person who knows who he is and where he's going, and here he almost feels conflicted again. But
I liken it to like, and I can understand why people would feel that way about after the Venditti run, because I mean, you and I both know we're going to miss that run like crazy. But I liken this to where, after the end of his run, Hal Jordan's had some time off. He's been doing whatever he's doing, and just figuring things out. And this is the pickup of a new story for him internally and physically or whatnot.
Right. We don't really know what's happened since the Dan Jurgens book, after Green Lanterns ended. We know in terms of our reading, it's only been like a month, but we don't know for the character how long it's been and what he's been through since he came back. We last saw Hal in the Hal Jordan book where he's embracing Carol Ferris, and here we see him without Carol Ferris. So it's hard. Without knowing some of those pieces, it's hard to say. So I'm basically trying to look at it as this is almost like a reset, but not quite, because we don't know what's transpired in between, and we just kind of have to accept that and go forward. And I'm willing to do that. And I hope other people are as well, especially those that maybe aren't quite as happy with some of the depictions here. I think the only things I really had problems with was some of the dialogue when Hal's in the fist fight in Albuquerque. Out in the desert, not in Albuquerque, but when he's out in the desert, there's a couple things he says that the way it's phrased sounds awkward to me. But other than that, let's jump into the beginning of this. It starts out with the Guardians, and of course, these Guardians do not look like the Guardians we saw when the last time we had Guardians.
Definitely.
So they're definitely different. We don't know what's happened. We know O is back as this issue unfolds, but we jump to this whole thing with some new Green Lanterns: Maxim Tox, Fluzel Flem, and Trilla True. And if those three characters names don't make you think of that, make you realize Grant Morrison's writing this, I don't know what will.
So accurate. That's so accurate.
And the whole opening sequence is just very. When you tell somebody that Grant Morrison is writing a Green Lantern book and you open up the book and this is the first thing you see, you're like, yep, that's Grant Morrison. It's very. The first thing that came to my mind was Valerian. In terms of the wacky aliens and the unusual spacescapes and so on. And we're definitely not on Earth. We're definitely out there in a very much a living universe that's very much different from our own. A very different planet. We see these Green Lanterns. We see Green Lantern lose a finger and act kind of like very flippant about it, which is kind of unusual.
Yeah, it was.
The Fluzel Flem, interesting character. Great name, Fluzel Flem. What a great. But I love the line.
Metron. Look at him. He kind of looks like Metron, or even Miracle, Mr. Miracle.
He's this infectious disease. Fluzel Flem doesn't catch you; you catch Fluzel Flem, which I think is kind of funny. It's just a wacky, very much out there kind of thing. But the gist of the whole story is that once these guys get captured, Chrysalon, who is the successor to Chazalon. It's interesting. Chrysalon was never shown in the comics, but he was in some of the Justice League Unlimited episodes. And,
that's interesting, really.
Yeah, he looks a lot like Chazalon because he's from the same planet, but he's the successor to Chazalon. Chazalon was killed at one point. He was an Alpha Lantern, and then he died, and he became a Black Lantern, and all that good stuff. But he's taking these three people, these three aliens that were captured, and he's put them on a spaceship, much like Abin Sur. They calling it a meat wagon, and he's off to cart them off. And one of the things that was really neat is after that whole scene wraps up, you were introduced to Controller Mu. And to read the interviews with Grant Morrison, he is a controller, as in the controllers that we're familiar with, and that when he was writing these first issues of this new series, he had planned on using the controllers, not knowing that Robert Venditti was going to use the controllers. So he had to kind of rethink his approach, and I believe where he said he's going to go with this is that these controllers are they're almost like an offshoot, or they disagreed with the other controllers, and so they kind of went off on their own. And he's kind of he's his own little thing, and he's talking to this character he calls Commander Crack. And this is where, Grant Morrison is known for kind of plucking some of the obscure characters from DC history's past. Commander Crack actually appeared in 1959.
Seriously, I didn't. Man, where did you look? Did you look that up, or did you have to?
I looked it up. Liam Sharp on Twitter mentioned that nobody had caught it, and I hadn't caught who the character was either. I was Googling some of the characters in here to see if any of them were there, and I missed Commander Crack, but he was in Batman number 128, and he was the only appeared in one issue. But I thought it was interesting that the issue was from 1959, which is, of course, the same year as Showcase 22.
Oh.
So I thought that was cool, but he shows up.
Very cool nod.
Yeah, it was really kind of neat. And anyway, Maxim Tox is killed by the cargo on board this ship. And then we see Chrysalon leave with the meat wagon, and then we jump forward to Albuquerque, New Mexico area out in the desert with Hal's kind of laying there watching the planes fly overhead. And, this depiction of Hal is where some people think it's regression. I'm not sure if it's regression or if he's taken stock of himself because he's been off duty for a little while.
I would say reflection.
Yeah, I think so too.
I don't think. I mean, Hal doesn't just strike me as the kind of person who. I mean, yeah, there may be times in his past when he's been written where he's gotten down or gotten hard on himself, but I mean, he's never gotten to the point where he regresses internally to where he's fighting all these internal demons or whatnot. It just seems to me like he's a bounce back character. It just takes some time to get over some stuff or takes some time to get some rest, and he's usually back at it.
Yeah, I think he's just kind of going through that period. And the character that he's with here, that he makes love to in the desert, Eve, is not a new character. This is Eve. I'm probably going to mispronounce the last name, but it's Doremus. And Eve Doremus was created by Gardner Fox back in 1967 in Green Lantern number 58. And there was a time when they weren't sure what to do with Hal after John Broome left. And so when Gardner Fox was writing the series, he decided to take Hal away from being a test pilot and make him an insurance adjuster of all things. And Hal leaves Coast City and he goes to Evergreen City. Yes, I know, really kind of a lousy name for of course he goes to Evergreen City.
Right,
but
exactly.
Eve Doremus was created as a counterpoint to Carol, and Hal dated her for about a year, and then she disappeared from the comics altogether. And I think she was shown once in a flashback or as a vision or something that was created to taunt Hal. They basically had all these different women, Kyria Limbo and Eve and a couple of other characters they were using to show Hal his past. But they dated briefly, and then Hal went back to Coast City to try to hook back up with Carol. But this is Eve Doremus. So I don't know what Hal is doing. Is he revisiting his past? I don't know. But for whatever reason, he has kind of lined himself up with Eve Doremus, and he tried to... he was, what was the job said he was doing? Oh, he was pumping gas.
Well, maybe, first of all, you got to commend these writers for bringing back these characters from a long time ago. That's research, You could tell Grant went back and looked through all these issues of Green Lantern and put all these pieces together in the story he was going to tell. But on the other hand, you're talking about what version of Hal we're starting to see here, and also think about this from Grant Morrison's perspective. I mean, he was wanting to help create the multiversity, so we could be looking at a version of Hal Jordan that's maybe entirely different. That could be a lead up into something that's bigger than what we even thinking it is at this point.
Yeah, who knows? But I wasn't taken aback by the sex scene in the desert. That didn't bother me at all. Did it bother you?
No, I don't understand why that would be such an issue. Everybody knows that Carol Ferris is a come and go character at this point. And their relationship is tumultuous at best. But this is Hal Jordan we're talking about, and not only that, he's been off planet for how long now? For so many years, or doing whatever he's doing. And this is a point now where, like, I go back to what I said before, reflection, and he's back to living his everyday life, and human nature is going to tell you this is probably going to happen.
Yeah, I for whatever reason, he's not with Carol, despite what we saw at the end of Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, and who knows why that is. Maybe we'll see that, maybe we won't. But anyway, Hal leaves Eve, and he's off walking through the desert and encounters an alien, or actually these three aliens, which are exactly one alien, kind of hard to describe. But right. But I thought it was interesting that Hal figures out rather quickly that they're aliens, and he gets into a fist fight. And this was the one scene where I had a bit of a problem with dialogue. The whole "I'll fight any fool who's game" and "I got nothing better to do now" sounded a little awkward to me. But anyway, he gets into,
from Hal Jordan, it does, yeah.
Yeah, but he gets into this fist fight. He knocks the guys out, and then I like the nod to Showcase 22 and Hal's origin when he sees the crashed ship off in the desert, and he's like, "Well, deja vu notwithstanding." I thought that was kind of neat. It was a neat touch.
Yeah, it is cool. It is cool.
I liked how when you see Chrysalon and he's damaged here, how the facets and stuff have tried to recrystallize or fix themselves on the side, on his right side where he's damaged.
Oh, yeah, I see that over there on the right side of his face. You're talking about on his shoulder?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty neat looking.
Yeah, a neat little piece of detail there. And, Hal's talking to him, and he kind of gets the lowdown of what's going on, and he charges his ring, because one of the things that does connect back is Hal doesn't have his lantern because the Guardians are apparently still trying to figure out how to make him hack-proof. But somehow Chrysalon has his lantern still. I'm not sure, whatever. We'll just go with it. But he charges the ring up, and we get the oath, which was a neat little moment. And then he goes off to Albuquerque and deals with the escaped aliens. Kind of a neat little scene. He uses a weight to take one down, and he uses the fact that, you get too big and your body can't support its mass on one of them. Kind of neat.
You really got scientific with him.
Yeah, which, is not unlike the Hal from the Silver Age. When Hal was in the early part of his career, he was much more scientific. He would think his way out of the situation with the constructs, and he would use scientific principles to figure out how to undermine the characters he was fighting. So I thought that was kind of neat. I thought the nobody panic chill line was a little... Chill's not something I would picture Hal saying, but okay, whatever.
That sounds something more like Kyle.
Yeah. So there's little things like that as I'm reading it, I'm like, I liked it, but then there's some things I'm not sure about, and that being one of them. But
anyway. It's like that last scene where it says, "So what if I get even bigger? Then what will you do?" And he says, "Laugh my ass off, probably." Yeah,
exactly.
That's typical Hal, right? I mean, that's Hal right there at all.
Yeah. So to me, it's like he's still finding his footing with it all. But I love the image of Hal going off to New Oa, and he gets there, and we're finding out that there's a traitor in the midst, which is not terribly original, but who knows where this is going to go, because we're planting the seeds for the story. One of the things that I thought was interesting is we do see a return to the Book of Oa, which I don't think we've seen in quite a while.
No, I haven't seen or had it mentioned in quite a while.
I think the last time we saw it was in the last issue of the Morrison, or not Morrison, the last issue of the Jeff Johns run, where Sinestro is using the Book of Oa to teach a new recruit about the history of the Green Lanterns.
Oh, okay. But
what's interesting here is, they're talking about how the Book of Oa has been tampered with. And did you notice the logo on the book?
Hold on, I'm going to that page right now. You're talking about when they're standing there in front of it. It's got that circular pattern.
Uh-huh.
What is that logo? What is that from?
Dr. Manhattan.
Oh, for Pete's sake, is it really?
Yes, that's Dr. Manhattan's logo. So the assumption is that this is a wink and a nod to Doomsday Clock, and that Dr. Manhattan has somehow rewritten Green Lantern history.
Now, what would be really cool, and if it leads into this, is to have some aspect of Alan Scott come back in this book. Because I would love to see a Liam Sharp draw Alan Scott.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where this goes. This could be basically the beginning of something else. Could this be what pulls Green Lantern into the Doomsday Clock story? Or is this just Grant Morrison trying to connect the tissue to the larger DC universe and kind of give us an idea of time and place? Hard to say.
How far are you on Doomsday Clock?
I'm current with it.
So you've read issue 7 then? That's the most current one, right?
I think it's issue 6 or 7, yeah.
Okay. I was just curious. I'm just not a big fan of it.
I'm kind of hit or miss on that book. But anyway,
Right.
Back to this story. One of the things that's interesting is that the Guardian is talking to Hal, and he starts talking about all these different lanterns besides the Green Lanterns that are apparently under the control of, or under the leadership of, the Guardians of the Universe. And they talk about X-ray lanterns and radio lanterns and gamma lanterns and microwave lanterns. What do you think about that?
I don't know. I mean, this could be like a big plan for Morrison. You know, I mean, we've introduced other lanterns at some point from the emotional spectrum, but I mean, we've never introduced lanterns from a scientific kind of spectrum. You know what I'm saying? That has to do with wavelengths, or it has to do with colors.
Yeah, the only thing I've seen is over in the Justice League book, Scott Snyder is doing something with John Stewart, and he's an ultraviolet lantern.
Right, he has been doing that, and I need to get caught up on that title. I don't think he's the ultraviolet lantern anymore, though.
Yeah, I haven't been reading the series, so I'm not sure. I don't know whether that was something that's being prolonged or whether that was just a couple issues.
I think that was just a couple issues at the time. They're doing an Aquaman crossover now.
Ah, gotcha. So I'm not sure what I think about it. I have to see how it unfolds. But then it ends with us seeing Controller Mu and the antimatter lantern, which looks like a version of Hal Jordan with a yellow costume.
Which is interesting enough. What did you think of the artwork in this book?
I liked it. I thought that what I liked about Liam Sharp is, the European comment about the opening sequence is very European looking to me, and counterposed to that is Hal in the Old West, and that's a very gritty looking section. And I thought Liam Sharp did a great job of bringing both of those disparate elements together, and I think the colorist did a great job of making the space stuff seem very vibrant and bright and lively, and the Earth stuff a little bit more muted, which I think is definitely a deliberate choice to contrast life on Earth versus life out in space.
Well put. That's really well put. And I was going to add, of course, with Liam Sharp, he did the Brave and the Bold series, and I always really, really enjoyed his Wonder Woman. The way he draws Wonder Woman was elegant and really nice, and I see that pretty much the same way in this. I mean, a lot of these characters look really, really elegant, real regal. Sure, they're messy at times, but if you've noticed, his art, while it's complex, it's still clean, even when there's a lot going on in one book, or on one page or one panel.
Well, and I love the level of detail.
Oh, it's a trip. I mean, and put that with Morrison's mind, and you knew you were going to come up with this whole cosmic trippy book here.
So the question I've got is the antimatter lantern, is this Morrison's take on the anti-Green Lantern Corps? And I don't know, Phil, if you remember the anti-Green Lantern Corps, but this was from 1982. It was Marv Wolfman and Joe Staton. It was from Green Lantern issue number 150. And basically the Weaponers of Quord had developed their own power rings, which operated off of black light.
Huh, really interesting.
Yep, and they fought the Green Lanterns. And their outfits looked like the Green Lantern outfits, but instead of green and black, they were more like a purple and black, or like a black light and black. This version of the antimatter lantern is yellow, which again ties it to the antimatter universe and Quord, and the Quordian outfits were always yellow, and you think of the Sinestro Corps and so on. I'm not sure what to take of it. I mean, this obviously looks like a doppelganger of Hal, so is this another version of Hal from the antimatter universe? That's my first guess.
Well, and I didn't know that history of that, but I mean, I don't know, you've read a lot of Grant Morrison stuff, and I find it hard to believe I'm sure he's read enough material to know that whatever he wants to give fans is going to be new, or it's going to be a reapproach from something that, like, a fan like you would remember about that sequence of events with this anti-lantern. It's like he's going to bring them elements back and make it a nuanced thing.
Yeah, I'm really interested in seeing what he does with it. You know, it really piqued my curiosity.
Well, the book was a hit. I mean, everything I was reading about it after I read it, because I read it early that morning when it came out, was the first thing that I did. And then subsequently throughout the day, I didn't want to get involved with any spoilers, but I mean, it was all upbeat. Everybody was really, really talking. You know, they really, really liked it. They loved the art. You know, of course, Liam Sharp, just an amazing artist. But a lot of the people that I talked to, you know, going back and forth with, they were really, really impressed by it. And of course, like you and I, we know each other and we know our age bracket and where we come from and stuff like that. But like a lot of these other fans, we don't know what age bracket they're in, so we don't know what their perspective is outside of our own and what we've grown up with as far as the Green Lantern Corps. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah. You know, I do think that this issue is new reader friendly. So I think people who are buying this as their first Green Lantern book and they're doing it because obviously it's a #1 issue and it's Grant Morrison and they want to check it out, I think it's easily accessible to them. I think for someone like in our age group, we've seen so many different iterations of Hal that it doesn't shock me when there's a change like this. Whether I like it or not, that's a whole nother story. I think for some people who have only been reading the book since Johns was on it, this may be a bit more of a completely different palette for them.
It's probably a jarring switch than what they're used to.
Yeah.
Jeff Johns and Grant Morrison are two different styles of writers, and not only that, I mean, it's all about your artistic impression, you know. And some of these writers, they envision a different character than what you and I might like, or what another fan might like. And I hope it doesn't lose any readers, or I hope it doesn't lose any numbers as far as the sales going, because I still want to see it all continue to do well. But I also hope that it grows a lot of new readers, you know, that latch on to this. It seems like it's really, really hyped a lot. It seems like they really, really put a lot of marketing into it, you know, leading up to when this was released.
Now, did your store give away free posters? Because I heard that was one of the things that happened.
I downloaded mine digitally that morning, and then I usually pick up a copy later on when I go visit the store. It's down the road, so I don't know if they were giving them out or not. I couldn't say.
My store wasn't giving them out. One of the things that I did like about the paper edition is there was a code for a free digital version of the book.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
It was nice because you got the digital essentially for free at that point. Did you look at the coming soon double page spread after the issue was over in the back of the book?
I like how they're going to include the story of like Green Arrow again. I like how they're going to bring him back.
Yeah, you know, I think Morrison's really going to do something different there. And one of the things that he talked about was that, and this is something I really agree with Morrison on, is when Denny O'Neil wrote the Hard Traveling Heroes books, and I know they're highly regarded and so on, but personally, as a Green Lantern fan, I didn't care for it because I thought that Denny O'Neil took Hal and he's like, okay, I need someone to be the foil for Green Arrow to represent my perspective on what's going on in the country. So we're going to take Hal and make him kind of the traditional conservative, ultra-conservative cop, and he's going to be the person who's always wrong because my character is going to be the one talking about what's going on in the country and making Hal realize all that stuff. And Hal, from somebody who's been out in space, I don't think he gets worried or bothered or interested in some of those things. I think he's well above some of the things that he was accused of. And I remember in particular that very famous image of the grizzled man that comes up to Hal and says, I've heard you've been doing things for the green skins and the blue skins and so on, but what have you done for the black skins? And I should have been saying I've been saving everybody's butt for years. I don't think he sees color.
I think we've mentioned that before. I mean, he, like you said, he's seen so many alien races. I don't think he sees any of that. I mean, I think he's pretty transparent. I think he sees beyond all ethnicities, I mean, even when it comes to the asexual side, I mean, he's seen all kinds of stuff. Right.
And that was one of the things I didn't like about the Hard Traveling Heroes run. And one of the things that Morrison has said in interviews is that this team up he wants to do with Green Arrow is going to be a lot different because he's looking at Hal from a different lens. So I'm really looking forward to that team up. The other thing I thought was interesting was that picture of all the different Green Lanterns in the there's like four circles with images, and one's got a whole bunch of different Green Lanterns in it. And some of those are kind of familiar looking, and I don't know whether you recognize any of them, but some of them are. One of them is Bat Lantern from Earth 32. There's John Stewart there from Earth 23. So it looks like this is almost like a Green Lantern Corps from the multiverse, because all these different.
Which would be really trippy. I mean, you think about 52 different Earths, you get 52 different Green Lantern Corps.
yeah, there's a whole bunch of different ones, and it looks like there's like a variation on a Bizarro version of them. But there's a Abin Sur, Earth 20 is there. Cairo from Batman Beyond is there. So it's interesting to see all of those characters there. Obviously, they're going to show up at some point for something. Otherwise, we wouldn't see that. The Broken Lantern is kind of interesting, and I'm not sure. Obviously, the three they all look like they're female characters from the imagery, but two of them are wearing outfits that are very much like Controller Moos. So I'm assuming that they are controllers, and I'm assuming that the very almost insectoid looking creature might be one of the Black Stars that they're talking about. I'm not sure.
Well, the back two look like they got Dark Star's outfit on, don't they?
Yeah, those look like, if you look at Controller Moo's outfit, they're very similar to Controller Moo.
Oh yeah, I got you. Okay, right.
Except for the one woman's got the sleeveless look because her arms are like Hulk Hogan's arms. So I'm really kind of looking forward to this. I want to see where it goes. I'm reserving my criticism a little bit because I want to see where Morrison's going to take the character, and I'm giving him the artistic freedom that he deserves to have to tell his version of the Green Lantern mythology. I just hope we don't lose people that are having a hard time with it.
Well, and that's what I was afraid of, because Grant Morrison's a great writer, but he's often been criticized, and a lot of people don't like him because of his style, and I hate to see Lantern fans jump ship just because of that. What I mean?
I have liked most of what I've read from Morrison. I think it isn't that I don't like some of the things he writes, but some of them I find too convoluted for me to read. When I've tried to read Multiversity, I felt like an absolute moron. The same in Final Crisis. I felt like a moron. But his All-Star Superman is wonderful.
Right, that was a really good book.
And I liked a lot of his Batman run. So I don't want to say I don't like him or I do like him. I'm kind of in the middle. And when I don't like him, it isn't that I don't like it, but sometimes it's intellectually more challenging than I want my comics to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I totally get it.
But anyway, so this is issue number 1. Intergalactic Lawman is the whole thing. This is supposed to be a police procedural in space. I'm excited for the book. I think Liam Sharp, his work looks really good. And he's been commenting and talking a lot on social media about, his work is only going to get better from this issue.
Now, is this going to be just monthly title?
Yep, it'll be a monthly book. So isn't it hard to go from, it wasn't too long ago we had 4 or 5 books a month, then we went down to 4 books a month, then we went down to 2 books a month, and now we're down to 1 a month.
Yeah, it's a shame, man. It's a shame.
It's hard, it's hard. I want more.
No, I totally agree.
But anyway, that was our conversation on The Green Lantern. If you've got some comments about the book and want to share your thoughts, we'd love to hear from you, and we hope to hear from you guys between now and the next episode. So, Phil, let's take a break, and we'll come back shortly, and we'll be talking about some Green Lantern Mosaic.
All right, sounds great.
My name is John Mayo.
And I'm Bob Retall.
What is the Weekly Comics Spotlight?
Comics reviews from 2 fans with 65 years of combined comics reading experience,
who each get and read well over 100 different comics each month from Marvel, DC, and a wide variety of independent publishers.
Reviews that highlight books that may not hit everyone's radar screen since most people don't buy so many different comics each month.
Reviews with honest opinions. We enjoy comics but realize not every issue that we read is a solid gold masterpiece. All in about 30 minutes. So please check out the Weekly Comics Spotlight at www.comicbookpage.com/podcast.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. And Phil and I have our retro review for this episode. And we're going to go back in time in our Wayback Machine to the, I think it was the late 80s, early 90s, when Green Lantern was under the tutelage of writer Gerard Jones, the infamous Gerard Jones, and he had relaunched Green Lantern, and so it was doing well, and so they decided to do another book, and he had an idea for a book which was a little, I shouldn't say a little, it's a lot less of a traditional superhero comic book, and he did a book called Green Lantern Mosaic that starred John Stewart. So Phil, you're going to lead us into this because this was your pick for the episode. So we're going to talk about the first couple of issues of this series.
Right. So, I mean, I didn't want to be impartial towards the fans out there that like all these characters, all these Green Lantern characters that you and I talk about every week. So I thought, well, why not do a John Stewart one? But I didn't want to do just any John Stewart title. So I figured I'd want to pick one that was specifically just for him. And of course I had to pick one of the trippiest ones, minus the one that we just read this week when it came to the Mosaic. Because that first issue was, it was a trip. It was almost like reading The Green Lantern this week by Grant Morrison.
Yeah. It definitely was one of those mind-bendy books, and there's some issues of this series that get very psychedelic. So
it really does. So first couple issues, and to kind of like, get some readers involved on the overall story arc. The Mosaic world. This world was formed when Appa Ali Apsa, he's a lone guardian, left behind when the other guardians left this dimension. So he got super lonely, apparently, from what I understand, and sort of went kind of crazy. Conversely, kind of like Hal Jordan did during Emerald Twilight. Seems to be like it happens to all these characters. So he went out and he plucked up a city from every world he'd ever visited, and he brought them to Oa to keep him company, because that's how crazy this guy was. So after he was defeated and the other Guardians returned, they decided to keep the experiment going, and then John Stewart was put in charge of keeping things orderly, which was difficult considering that the spirit of Sinestro was in fact haunting John Stewart, which led to some bad stuff. So, intro into this first issue, and then you got John Stewart, kind of like, have you read any of this, Myron?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so you got John Stewart, kind of like he's just sitting there talking to himself. He's having these nice conversations with himself, and then of course he's got all this stuff happening in the background, and then he comes up against these twins. Now, are you familiar with these twins at all?
A bit, yeah. But yeah, this is when you look at this, it's very trippy. It's very psychedelic. And this is, if you didn't know this was a book set back in the day, you might think this was a Grant Morrison book.
It really was. Because this is, you're talking the early 90s, so it's got that weird cross into that next decade kind of thing going on. So then, of course, I'm not sure artistically how John Stewart's drawing. He looks like a Billy D. Williams. You know what I mean?
Kinda, yeah. It's a little. It's Cully Hamner is the artist, and it's definitely not your traditional look at John Stewart. But
no, it's really not. He looks a little odd. I kind of liked him when he had the big hair, his big afro. I really enjoyed him when he had that kind of when he had that look going on.
But yeah,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say so he's on this. He's on Oa, but Oa is now populated by this whole quilt world of all these different cities. So there's all these different alien cities, all sharing. Yeah, so they're all sharing the same space and trying to get along, or not.
So it's kind of like he reimagines John Stewart as like this intellectual, which oddly enough he really kind of is. He draws off his militarism, which is a lot of what the newer readers understand and a lot of what the newer readers pick up on. But a lot of the stuff that I've written that I've read of John Stewart early on, he's been really, really intellectual in his approach. I don't know if you as a fan of John Stewart have known that or not, or picked up on that yourself.
Well, yeah, this particular series, he's very much more of an intellectual, and back in the day, he was kind of that architect, but the military stuff didn't come around too much until later on. But they touch on it a little bit. But yeah, here he's very much very much of an intellectual, and it was almost a departure for the character, but it was I think a good departure for the character.
Oh, when he went from intellectual to military, or what are you talking about?
Just the way we see him here in this series.
Yeah, it's kind of sad that they don't. He's not written in the same kind of fashion anymore. I mean, because he, like you said, he thinks architecturally, and of course he's in charge of this patchwork framework full of all these separate cities that are all put together, and he's got to basically keep in charge of all of them at one time.
Right.
Kind of like the policeman, kind of like the overseer of all these different kind of these species and these different alien races or whatnot.
And there is an Earth city there as well.
Oh, there is. I didn't know that.
Yep. There's an Earth city there. There's from Tomar Ray's planet. There's a city from his planet. There's just a whole bunch of different ones, but a lot of different really wacky looking creatures. And of course, you've got those that want to feed on the others, and it's just they're not just getting along as one would expect. No, definitely not. But it's got that nuance. I don't know. It's got that '90s feel to it. I mean, the '90s comics had a certain feel to it. I don't know if you ever thought back on that, or if you remember that when you were reading them at the time. But they had this kind of a different vibe to it than when it transitioned from the '80s and into the 2000s. And this was like prime '90s comic books. I mean, this is kind of what they were filled with, Yeah, there's even a part where he almost breaks the fourth wall and he talks to the readers.
which is just a complete different kind of characterization of John Stewart, I mean, and a lot of it was kind of humorous at times, and I don't know. I picked it because I only wanted to read like the first couple of issues and touch back on it because it has been so long since I've even remembered reading this book. But I generally understand why it's not really talked about that much, because it's not really popular. It's not really a popularization of John Stewart in his heyday. But yet conversely, it really is a popularization of John Stewart because it's a different kind of aspect on how he was as a Green Lantern that's often overlooked.
Yeah, well, and this is because it is so trippy and it's such a intellectual exercise more than a lot of physicality and a lot of those kind of interactions, and it's a different kind of book. It definitely was very much in contrast to most comics that were out in that day and time. I could see this if this was coming out in this time period, it would be a Vertigo book.
Yeah, that makes more sense. That makes a lot of sense.
And this was also when this was, Gerard Jones, this was his pet project. And the series lasted 18 issues. It fell victim to the infamous relationship between Gerard Jones and editor Kevin Dooley. Kevin Dooley was a new editor at DC, and he was given the Green Lantern book. And he and Gerard Jones did not see eye to eye, and their relationship deteriorated immensely, and it impacted the quality of the books. And that's what led to Emerald Twilight. But unfortunately, this series was a casualty of that relationship.
Huh. That's such a shame. And it happens a lot between a lot of writers, it seems like. The same thing happens with who we just talked about, Alan Moore, and he's had a lot of conflict of interest. The same thing happened with Grant Morrison at different occasions with DC Comics, I think.
Yeah. Well, issue 2 of this series is infamous.
Let me go to issue 2 here. I'm getting it right now.
Issue 2 had a lot to do with Chip.
Yeah, and he's a big fan favorite,
Yeah, well, and this is the infamous issue where Chip gets hit by a yellow school bus. They killed poor Chip off in this issue. I felt so bad because he was such a loved character, and this whole story's got a lot of with Chip. Chip and Selak had a neat relationship, and
he put up a good fight this issue too. He really did put up a good fight, and he really was slugging it out hardcore.
Yeah, he's looking the wrong way, and the yellow truck drives over him, and you hear this thud sound off panel, and John Stewart goes and finds some red blood, and then he finds poor Chip's body. He's been hit by a truck.
and it's so gory. And then, of course, look what it leads into at the end with the next issue, and it says nuts.
Yeah. Again, it's that very trippy, and there aren't a lot of panels on the page, a lot of close-ups. There's some of the artwork some of the depictions of John, especially facially, that I didn't like about it.
Well, I think that was that Coley Hamner or whoever that was. I'm not really too familiar with him.
Well, like the way that John looks at the last page of the second issue, the first panel that's on that page. He just looks awful.
Yes.
He looks. I don't know how to describe it, but he just doesn't look right. But anyway, very interesting series. It's very trippy. It's unfortunate that it hasn't been collected in trade.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Well, I mean, you're right. Usually I think of a lot of trades usually go ebb and flow by popularity, depending on who it is. But I mean, if you look at Batman trades, he's got just a ton of them.
Yeah.
And so does Justice League and Superman. I'm surprised this hasn't been included in the lexicon.
Yeah, and I expect now, considering what happened with Gerard Jones, we'll probably never see it in trade.
No, I wouldn't think you would.
But if you can find it in the dollar bin or pick up the issues again, there were only 18 of them.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. And the long story short, at the end, I won't give away any endings, but let's just say that it all works out well for John Stewart.
The one thing I think I liked about this was it felt like a complete story.
Yeah, and it was contained in its own. Like it was contained in that 18 issues, and they got the point across, and they got everything that they wanted to get done, and it ended on a good note. Yeah.
I thought it was definitely a complete story. It isn't like, when the book got canceled, they didn't get a chance to get an ending in. I think he was able to conclude it the way he wanted to. It's interesting from a visual standpoint, too, because John Stewart wears several different types of outfits throughout the series, which is neat to see.
Yeah, I noticed that. Well, a couple of times it looked like Parallax for a minute there.
Yeah, very interesting designs. And, Hal makes a couple of appearances. I think Kat Matui makes an appearance.
Well, he uses the ring to talk to her throughout the whole series.
Yeah, because this is after Kat Matui was killed.
Sure.
So, yeah, you just kind of have the ghost of Kat Matui and Guy Gardner, I think, shows up in an issue. And I think the Flash shows up in a couple of issues. I'm not sure how Flash got there. I can't remember now. But he was in an issue or two towards the end. But, again, very... I hate to keep using the word trippy, but I can't find another word that fits.
No, it really was. I mean, Mosaic, as it says, it's like that in itself. I mean, and Mosaic is kind of trippy if you look at it a certain perspective. And, this was really, really reflective on kind of like Grant Morrison's vision that came out this week. And I don't know, maybe people will go back and pick this one up. I mean, like I said, I was kind of interested in it, but again, I'm not a John Stewart fan. So, I mean, I'm kind of biased when it comes that way.
Well, I think this was a time when John got a chance to shine. There were periods when John came into the picture. There were periods of time from the time that John came back to when they brought Guy back, where one of the three of them would be the Green Lantern, and they'd kind of rotate back and forth, and they'd each get a little bit of the limelight, and then Hal would come back for a while, and the other one would become the main Green Lantern and get spotlight for a while. But this was really a chance for John to have his own book for a prolonged period of time, at least a year and a half. So
yeah.
But anyway, good pick.
That wasn't bad. I can find better ones. The next one I'm going to go with a Guy Gardner one.
All right. Well,
I'm not sure what I'm going to do. The next one's your pick, though.
Oh, okay. Well, the next episode, we're going to have to do an episode that's nothing but retro review because we won't have another Green Lantern book until December. Okay.
Well, we can do a retro review. I'll do one on my end and you do one on your end. So we'll do two of them.
I like that idea. We'll do two retro reviews. It'll be a retro review tag team episode.
Okay. I'm down.
All right. Let's take a quick break and we'll come back and wrap things up.
All right, Myron, we're back. Another great episode. Always nice talking to you again. But unfortunately, the sad part about it is we don't have a lot of random stuff to talk about. So we're going to have to drum some up from the past and start doing more retro stuff.
Yeah, I agree. It's a difficult time not to have a book that's out more regularly, but hopefully the books are good enough quality that it will carry us over from episode to episode or month to month. And we'll just have to start doing some retro stuff and who knows, we'll find some good stuff to talk about.
We will.
Well, that wraps up episode number 130. So we are at least at the time of recording, we're at the beginning of November. So we'll probably try to get together maybe the week of Thanksgiving, the week before Thanksgiving hits, and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, we'll do that. Sounds great to me.
All right. So thanks again for listening. We always like getting together and talking about Green Lantern stuff, and we hope you've enjoyed the episode, and we hope you'll join us next time when we do more Green Lantern conversation. So until then, keep your power rings charged, make every day your brightest day, and be good to each other out there.
We'll see you guys.
The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.